Welcome back, Deep Divers. Today we're going deep on the story of Alice Marie Johnson, from a life sentence in prison to becoming President Trump's pardon czar.
Hmm,
Talk about a second act, right?
absolutely. It's an incredible journey.
Yeah, we've got articles, video transcripts, social media posts. So we're going to try to cover it all, see how the story unfolded.
Yeah, it's a wild one. I've been looking through these.
Even Kim Kardashian's in this story, so you know it's going to be good.
Right, like how did we get from prison to reality TV to the White House?
Exactly. There's so many layers here, it's fascinating. But okay, let's start at the beginning. Where did it all begin for Alice Marie Johnson?
Well, she was born in Mississippi back in 1955, one of 9 kids.
Wow, 9.
9 kids. Yeah, her parents were sharecroppers. So you can imagine life wasn't easy.
No, definitely not. Talk about resilience built right in from the start.
Right, and even as a teenager, she became a mom, worked as a secretary, just trying to make ends meet.
These early sources, they paint a picture of someone who kept getting knocked down but kept getting back up.
Absolutely, a real fighter, but then things took a turn.
What happened?
She lost her job because of gambling, went through a divorce, and then tragedy hit. Her youngest son died in a motorcycle accident.
Oh gosh, that's awful.
Just devastating.
You have to wonder how all of that impacted her choices later on, you know?
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely took a toll. Johnson herself has talked about how those events pushed her down a dark path. She ended up involved with a cocaine trafficking organization.
And that led to her conviction in 1996.
Right, conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute, attempted possession, money laundering too.
Wow, and this was her first offense.
That's right, first time ever getting into trouble with the law.
And they gave her life in prison.
Life without parole, plus 25 years.
Plus 25 years. That seems so harsh, especially for a nonviolent offense.
Right, it was the war on drugs era. Sentencing was incredibly tough.
But then Kim Kardashian enters the picture.
Right, this is where the story takes a wild turn.
It's just crazy to think about a reality TV star influencing a presidential pardon.
Well, Kardashian had been learning about the case, became really passionate about it.
Yeah, I remember seeing her posts about it online.
She used her platform to bring attention to Johnson's story, spoke directly to President Trump about it.
And it worked.
It did. In June of 2018, Trump commuted Johnson's sentence.
That must have been an amazing feeling for her.
Oh, absolutely. But it gets even better.
What do you mean?
2 years later, in August 2020, Trump granted her a full pardon.
So her record was completely cleared.
Totally wiped clean.
Incredible.
It really is. Talk about a second chance.
So from inmate to advocate, almost overnight.
Exactly. And she didn't waste any time using her platform to help others.
Right. She founded Taking Action for Good, or TAG. That organization does some really important work.
Yeah, they focus on helping people re-enter society after prison, provide support, advocate for clemency and sentencing reform.
It's amazing how she turned her own experience into a force for positive change.
She really has. One article said she personally submitted over 100 clemency petitions before becoming pardon czar.
Wow, talk about dedication.
She's incredibly committed to this cause.
And the First Step Act, did her support for that have any impact, do you think?
Oh, definitely. The First Step Act was a big win for criminal justice reform.
What did it do exactly?
Well, it eased those harsh, mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenses, which directly impacted Johnson, of course.
Right.
It also expanded early release programs and focused on reducing recidivism.
So it was more than just letting people out of prison. It was about helping them stay out.
Exactly. And Johnson's story was really important in pushing for that change.
It's amazing to see how all of these things are connected.
It really is. And this is just the beginning of Alice Marie Johnson's story.
I know, right? Like, from prison to the White House. It's wild.
And we haven't even got to her role as pardon czar yet.
I can't wait to dive into that.
It's fascinating stuff, and it raises some really big questions about justice and redemption in America.
Questions we'll definitely be tackling, so stay tuned for part 2.
Definitely, you won't want to miss it.
And as always, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
We'll see you next time. It's amazing, isn't it, how one person's story can spark such a huge conversation.
Yeah, it makes you think about how many other Alice Marie Johnsons are out there. People who got caught in the system, maybe didn't get that lucky break.
Exactly. Her case really shines a light on some of the bigger issues with our justice system.
Like what? What are some of the key takeaways you're seeing?
Well, for one, her conviction happened during the war on drugs era, a time when sentencing for drug offenses was incredibly harsh, especially for nonviolent crimes.
And that disproportionately impacted communities of color, didn't it?
Absolutely. And we see that outrage reflected in some of the social media posts we've got.
People are pointing out the stark contrast, life in prison for a first-time nonviolent drug offense, while other people who committed far more serious crimes, are getting lighter sentences.
It's a valid point. It speaks to that systemic bias that's been woven into our justice system for decades.
In Johnson's case, the attention it got, it forced people to confront those uncomfortable truths.
Right, and it's not just about the sentencing itself. It's about what happens after.
A reentry, right?
Exactly. Going back into society after being incarcerated is incredibly challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine finding a job, housing, dealing with the stigma.
It's a lot to overcome, and that's where organizations like Johnson's TAG Foundation come in.
It provides that support system that so many people need.
Right. They offer job training, help people find housing, address those systemic issues that often lead to recidivism.
Because if you can't get back on your feet, it's easier to fall back into old patterns.
Exactly. And they have this program called Project Rebound. It specifically helps people find jobs in construction. They work with employers who are open to hiring formerly incarcerated individuals.
That's amazing. A real solution, not just talk.
Right. It shows that Johnson is committed to making a real difference.
But it also makes you wonder, shouldn't the government be doing more? Like, isn't it their responsibility to help people reintegrate into society?
That's a debate that's gaining a lot of traction.
Yeah, it seems like there's a growing understanding that just releasing people from prison isn't enough.
Right. You have to give them the support they need to actually succeed.
So the concept of second chances becomes more than just pardons and commutations.
It's about creating a system that actually allows people to rehabilitate and rebuild their lives.
And that benefits everyone, not just the individuals themselves.
Absolutely. Less crime, stronger communities, a safer society overall.
It's not about being soft on crime or tough on crime. It's about being smart about crime.
Right. Recognizing that true justice requires more than just punishment.
It needs rehabilitation, restoration, a belief that people can change.
And that's a message that's at the heart of Alice Marie Johnson's story.
It's a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
It is, but it's also a reminder that there's still so much work to be done. The system that put Alice Marie Johnson behind bars is still there, and countless others are still caught in it.
So where do we go from here? What can we learn from her story? How do we apply it to this bigger conversation about criminal justice reform?
I think one key takeaway is the power of individual stories. It was Alice Marie Johnson's story, her personal experience, that caught Kim Kardashian's attention, that got the media involved, that ultimately reached the president.
It put a face on the issue, made it relatable, impossible to ignore.
Exactly. It wasn't just an abstract policy debate anymore. It was about real people's lives.
And that's a powerful lesson for anyone who wants to create change.
Share those stories. Amplify the voices of those who are directly affected.
It's a reminder that behind every statistic, every policy debate, there are human beings whose lives are shaped by the choices we make as a society.
And that's why Alice Marie Johnson's story matters so much. It's not just about her. It's about everyone who's still waiting for their second chance.
It challenges us to look beyond the labels, the convictions, the headlines, and see the humanity in everyone, regardless of their past.
It makes us ask, what kind of justice system do we want? One that prioritizes punishment, or one that embraces redemption?
Those are some pretty big questions that I think will stay with our listeners.
I hope so, because ultimately it's through these conversations, these explorations of complex issues, that we start to imagine a better future. A future where second chances aren't the exception, they're the rule.
Okay, so Alice Marie Johnson, she goes from prisoner to advocate.
Yeah.
Helps push for the First Step Act. And now she's, pardons are, advising the president on clemency. It's quite a journey.
Absolutely. A remarkable transformation.
And the First Step Act, that was a pretty big deal, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a landmark piece of legislation, bipartisan, too.
Can you remind us what it actually did?
Sure. One of the key things was easing those mandatory minimum sentences.
Yeah.
Especially for drug offenses, which of course directly impacted Johnson.
Right, she got life for a nonviolent drug offense, her first offense. And the First Step Act, it gave judges more leeway in sentencing, right?
Exactly, more discretion. So hopefully we don't see those kinds of extreme sentences anymore.
So it's not just about getting people out of prison, it's about preventing those situations in the first place.
Right. It's about trying to make the system more just, more fair.
What else did the First Step Act do?
Well, it expanded opportunities for early release, recognizing that people can change, they can rehabilitate while they're incarcerated.
So it's not just about punishment, it's about giving people a chance to turn their lives around.
Exactly. And it put more emphasis on reducing recidivism.
So helping people stay out of prison once they're released.
Right. Providing support, resources, things like job training and substance abuse treatment.
It sounds like a really comprehensive approach.
It was a big step in the right direction, for sure.
And Johnson, her experience really helped highlight the need for these kinds of reforms.
Absolutely. Her story put a human face on the issue.
Made it real for people.
And now, as pardons are, she's using her position to advocate for others.
People who she believes were unjustly sentenced, especially under those old mandatory minimums.
Right, she's trying to correct some of those past injustices.
It's incredible how she went from being impacted by these laws to having a role in changing them.
It really is, but it's not without controversy.
Yeah, I was just looking at some of the social media posts. There are definitely some strong opinions out there.
Some people praise her work, see it as a step toward true justice. Others criticize it, say she's not doing enough.
Some say she's too focused on nonviolent drug offenses, not addressing the bigger issue of racial bias in the system.
It's complicated. There's no easy answer.
But it makes you think, where do you draw the line? Between accountability and compassion, between punishment and second chances.
That's the question, isn't it?
It's a question that every society grapples with.
And there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
But Alice Marie Johnson's story, it gives us some valuable insights.
It shows us the power of individual stories to change hearts and minds.
And to change laws.
Her resilience, her compassion, her willingness to work with people from all sides. It's inspiring. It shows that change is possible.
And it reminds us that behind all the policies, all the debates, there are real people.
People whose lives are affected by the choices we make.
Alice Marie Johnson's story, it's a testament to the power of the human spirit.
And it's a call to action for all of us.
To examine our own beliefs, to have these tough conversations, to work towards a more just and equitable future.
A future where second chances aren't just exceptions, they're the norm.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and work of Alice Marie Johnson. It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has.
We hope you learned something, maybe even feel inspired to get involved. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.